I have cataloged the Ashgai ruins for 11 seasons, and in all that time, I never once put my hand on the answering stone. Nobody on my crew did. We surveyed it from 30 paces with long-arm instruments, and told ourselves that was thoroughness, not fear. It was fear. Every Kelvethi who has ever worked the salt flats knows the old warning carved into the outpost lintel by hands older than the outpost itself. It answers what is asked of it, and it keeps what answers back. The stone itself is unremarkable to look at. A black wedge of alloy, waist-high, half swallowed by the crusted salt, its seal ring fused shut by something like 11,000 years of oxidation and drift dust. Precursor engineering, we call it, because we have no better word for a civilization whose name didn't survive them. The specification plates we recovered from a sister site 2 valleys over rated that ring's release torque at a figure our own excavation rigs can barely produce. A hydraulic press, mounted and braced, 3 full minutes of sustained load. That is what it takes to open it. That is what every serious paper on the site says it takes to open it. I was not thinking about torque figures the afternoon the human came, and stood over it with her hands on her hips, sweating through her collar, annoyed about a supply drone that was 4 hours late with our replacement filtration cartridges. Her name was Iris Calloway. She had been assigned to us as a relic recovery specialist under the Joint Survey Charter, 1 human folded into a crew of 11 Kelvethi, because the charter required a human presence, and nobody higher up the chain wanted to spare a better one. We gave her the unglamorous work, cataloging loose fragments, hauling crates. She did it without complaint, which we mistook, at first, for a lack of ambition. It was not that. It was simply that none of it bothered her. The old warning did not bother her either. I told her about it myself, early on, expecting the story to land the way it lands on everyone. A small chill, a half step back, the polite request to be reassigned somewhere the ground didn't have a history of taking people. She listened, nodded, and asked whether the disappearances had a common date range, because if they clustered she wanted to check it against the local dust storm cycle. I said there was no way to know. Most of what we have on the vanished is a name and a year, sometimes only a year. She said that was a shame, and went back to logging fragments. I began, over those first weeks, to notice a smaller pattern in her that I did not have a name for yet. She carried crates, 2 of my crew would split between them. She worked through a heat cycle that sent the rest of us inside for shade breaks, and came in afterward complaining only that the dust got into everything. Once, hauling a sample case up the switchback trail, she slipped on loose scree and caught the case one-handed against her own hip, rather than let 11 seasons of fragment work hit the ground, and did not seem to think the catch itself was worth mentioning. I filed each of these under temperament. I did not yet think to file them under anything measurable. That afternoon the drone was late, our filtration was failing, and half the crew was inside running numbers on whether we'd need to break camp early. Iris was outside because the heat didn't bother her either. She walked the perimeter to stretch her legs, and she stopped at the stone, and she crouched to read the corrosion pattern on the ring, the way she'd read 100 fragments before it, purely out of habit. I was 30 paces off with a scanner in my hand, exactly where the warning says a sensible person stands. I saw her reach out. I did not call out to stop her, because in 11 seasons, the ring had never moved for anyone, and some part of me had stopped believing it ever would. She got both hands around it and pulled the way you'd pull a stuck drawer. Nothing. She braced a boot against the housing and pulled again, and I remember thinking, with something close to relief, that this would be the moment the legend held. It gave on the third pull. Not a crack, not a grinding compromise. It simply rotated, the way a door opens for someone who has the key. 3 full centuries of drift corrosion shearing loose in under 4 seconds. And she staggered half a step from her own momentum and said something short and unhappy about her palm, because the old alloy had bitten a strip of skin off it on the way. She did not look at the open seal the way I was looking at it. She looked at her hand. I did not sleep that night. I pulled the seal's embedded strain logs, a feature I had forgotten it even had, because in 11 seasons, nothing had ever triggered them. The sensor had a threshold set absurdly high, calibrated by whoever built it to register only catastrophic load, the kind you'd need a press and a brace and 3 minutes to produce. It had one entry, a single spike, 4 seconds long, that cleared the threshold by a margin the log format wasn't built to display cleanly. The readout simply printed the number, and then, beneath it, a system flag I had never seen fire before. Value exceeds rated maximum. Verify sensor integrity. The sensor was not malfunctioning. I checked it twice. What took longer to find, because I did not want to find it, was the record of who had tried before her. The precursor archive 2 valleys over holds partial ledgers, not stories, not warnings, just intake logs from whatever expedition or pilgrimage or desperate local errand brought each visitor to that stone across 11 millennia. Cross-referenced against our own vanishing list, the pattern was there the whole time, sitting in plain records nobody had thought to align. Every name we have as vanished at the stone appears, a season or two earlier, in an intake log requesting release tooling they did not have, or claiming they'd found another way, or simply noting an intention to try by hand because the tools weren't available and the need was. Nobody was taken. The seal does not eat what is offered to it. It simply does not move for anything less than what it was built to require. And generation after generation of the desperate and the stubborn threw themselves at a mechanism rated for machinery, and the mechanism, being honest in the way only a machine can be honest, did not lie to them or forgive them. It held. Some of them stayed at it for days. One ledger, the oldest legible one, records a pilgrim who camped beside the stone for 11 nights, rationing water she should have spent traveling home, noting each morning that the ring had shifted by some measurement too small for her own tools to confirm, convincing herself she was close. She was not close. Nothing that came before Iris Calloway was ever close. The entries simply stop, mid-attempt, in a hand that starts steady and ends ragged. And then there is no further entry at all. The stone did not keep anyone. It only ever recorded, faithfully, the moment a person's strength ran out against a number that never moved for them. 11,000 years of that same flat, patient arithmetic. Nobody in 11,000 years had ever supplied the other side of the equation, until an off-duty relic specialist stopped to read a corrosion pattern and got irritated at a stuck drawer. I filed my report to the Survey Council 2 days later, and I want to be precise about what I put in it, because precision is the only thing that has ever mattered to me. I did not write that the legend was false. The legend was, in its way, exactly true. The stone does keep what tries and fails. I wrote that the missing variable, across 11 millennia of failed attempts, was never the mechanism and never the mystery. It was an applicant capable of clearing the threshold the mechanism was built to respect. I wrote that we now have a strain reading, verified twice, that no calibration error can explain away, produced without tooling, without bracing, without any apparent awareness on the part of the person producing it that she had done anything worth remarking on. She asked me, the evening I filed it, whether I'd found anything interesting in the old logs. I told her, as evenly as I could manage, that she had just solved an 11,000-year mystery with one hand, while looking for a bandage for the other. She looked at the strip of raw skin across her palm and said that was going to sting for a week, and went to find the med kit. I have amended our safety protocols to note that certain classifications of hazard on this site should now be considered variable by species, and I have recommended, in language the Council will not enjoy, that every future joint survey include at minimum one human assigned to structural assessment, rather than fragment recovery. Nobody asks me anymore how the stone was finally opened. They ask how long we'd had the answer standing in our own camp before we noticed it was standing there. There is no simple answer to that question either. I have decided, for my own sake, to stop looking for one.